Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar. This is Rachel Elnaugh, and I'm really delighted to have my special guest here tonight, Jason Vale. Hello, Jason.
Hello, good evening.
Hi. Thank you so much for joining us, Jason. So, just to give everyone a bit of a background on tonight's call, those of you who've read my blog and seen some of my tweets will know that a couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine, very close friend of mine, recommended that I read Jason's book. Kick the Drink Easily. Now, this is actually the first book you ever wrote, Jason. I think I'm right in saying, way before your Juice Master books on healthy eating and drinking. Um, and within 3 days, having kind of been a hedonist all of my life and really not being able to imagine life without drinking wine, and I had never really drank spirits, I really was a kind of wine drinker. Literally within 3 days of reading it, I completely just it was like a mental switch, a flick of a switch, and I just completely stopped drinking just like that. And it was actually incredibly easy. So, number one thing, Jason, I just really want to thank you for, as you say, giving me the key out of essentially what was a bit of a prison. So thank you for that, Jason.
That's all right. Well, I'll say it's my pleasure. Like you said, it was a long time ago that I actually wrote that book, that particular version of the book as well. And it's funny that a publisher hadn't taken it on at the time, and then I became very well known for juicing and health in general. And then a publisher was actually on one of my juicing retreats and read what was a self-published book at the time, which was called I think it was first entitled the Stop Drinking for Life,
Yeah.
and and they read the book and they stopped drinking. They had no intention of stopping drinking. They just read it while they were there, just curiosity as a publisher. But they'd stopped, and they were curious to see how it worked. Wasn't sure why it worked. Handed it round to a few other people in the office. They stopped. They didn't quite know how it worked, why it worked. But then they figured it didn't matter how it worked, why it worked. It worked. So then they published it, and it's been out in that current format for I think it's about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, maybe a year and a half, something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm glad, but more and more people are picking it up all the time, Rachel, and all it does really it just gives you a completely different view and perspective. I never advocate or say it is the only way to stop drinking at all. I just think there are different approaches for different people that in order for them to take it on board, and for some people the usual approaches aren't sufficient. They don't do it for them. They don't agree with them. So this is just a different approach. And like I said, it's not for everybody, but the vast majority of people that consume alcohol on a regular basis and are unsure if they are trapped, if you will, they just think they're drinking slightly more, or are they an alcoholic or not. This book just kind of explains the difference between a normal drinker, so to speak, and an alcoholic, and explains that really is there much of a difference at all, and actually maybe you're just an alcohol addict like everybody else. You may be deeper in the trap than some others, but actually here's the route out if you want it. And that's the key about the book for me, Rachel, is look, there isn't this hard-hitting, here's what alcohol is going to do to you. Anybody who's a heavy drinker already knows the downside of alcohol. The book explains if you want to root out, here's how to get out. If you don't want to root out, don't pick up the book.
Yeah. So just to say, just to explain to people on the call, because we've got lots of people joining, just to say, some people are saying, well, one person's saying they got problems with sound, but I'm assuming everyone else can hear us. So if you can't hear, well, actually, if you can't hear, probably you won't know that I'm saying this. Oh dear. Anyway, so just to say, the way we're going to run this is that I will have a chat with Jason, and then anyone who wants to come on the call and maybe speak about their experiences, ask Jason a question, you're quite welcome to. Happy to do that as anonymously if you like. So just give me an alias name to call you by. Everyone who's on this call, there's no viewing of the people who are on this call tonight, so it is totally anonymous. I have to say I've got three questions which were sent in advance of the call from people who couldn't make it but have got questions. So it would be really nice to get some of you guys onto the call and talking to Jason maybe in the second half. But Jason, just to kick off with, I mean, it wasn't. This is reading that book was really my first experience of you, and researching in preparation for tonight's call. I obviously realized there's so much more to what you do with the whole juice master concept. So Jason, give us a bit of a rounded CV of you, and your whole approach to drinking and eating healthily, just to give a bit of balance, because it's not all about booze, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, alcohol, I'm not just a crusade on booze only. Although if you read the book, because when I wrote it at the time, that is exactly how I felt. It does come across like that. I appreciate, but we kind of mellow slightly as we mature. But I was a heavy smoker. I was a heavy drinker. I was also heavy. I was about 15 stone, which may not sound huge amount, but considering I'm quite small at 5'7", then it was about 3.5 stone more than I should have been. I also had large breasts, which is not good for a man, clearly. I used to eat nothing but junk. I had severe psoriasis. I mean, covered from head to foot in psoriasis. I mean, I couldn't wear jeans without my skin cracking. My neck would crack. I mean, it was covered everywhere, all over my face, all the hands, body. I had eczema, severe hay fever, very bad asthma, using the Ventolin pump at least 14, 16 times a day. But smoking at the time was the biggest bugbear for me, and I tried just about every methodology to stop, and then eventually did stop. I stopped overnight from 60 a day to 0 and found it easy. Ended up opening a stop smoking clinic and running that for several years. And it was during my time there that alcohol really I thought, well, I'm teaching addiction here, but am I addicted myself to other things? And I felt a little bit like a hypocrite. So I started to look at alcohol in depth and think, well, maybe I'm drinking more than I would like to. I mean, at one point in my life, I was drinking up to 16 pints of lager a day. I would have,
Wow.
cans of Special Brew, cans of Tennant Super. If you don't know your alcohol, if you're listening out there, you don't know it, but Tennant Super, you set a torch to that. You set a match to that, it will just go up in flames. I mean, I was thunder, but I'd walk down the street, Rachel, I'd be living in a squat, and I'd be signing on the dole, and then I would literally be getting tick, as we called it, from the off license, which is credit, until the next dole check would come along. And living in a squat, I mean, that wasn't who I was as a human. I knew that all the time. I was caught in this trap, and I thought, well,
Yes.
this isn't me. What am I doing? This is ridiculous. I consider myself to be a relatively intelligent person, relatively level-headed, and I was effectively being controlled by substances contained either within a small tube, a cigarette, or within a can, alcohol, or within some glossy packaging, drug-like food, as I call it. And
Yes.
so I needed to escape from all of it. I didn't do it all at once. It was a gradual process, and you're learning all the time, Rich. I'm still learning today, and anybody with an open mind continues to learn. They never close the door on learning, and you can't ever be in a position where you ever get arrogant or say this is the only way, and so on. You tweak it as you go along, and there's always something new that props up. But what I have found is the vast majority of people that get involved in some of the work that I have had the privilege to put out there and do, they all say pretty much the same thing, that actually this is different because you are not what I describe as the flipping obvious brigade. So what I tend to do is the opposite of what my doctor did to me. So my doctor would say to me, Jason, you're asthmatic and you're a smoker. If you stop smoking, it would help your asthma. And I would say, well, no, shoot, Sherlock, are you kidding me? That's a revelation. All smokers know it's killing them. They know it's costing them a fortune. All drinkers tend to know kind of the downside of it, even if they think there's an upside, which I'll address as we go on with the call here. And most people know the consequences of eating junk food. The challenge is, of course, it's a drug, and drugs defy all logic. So logically, you can't apply logic to addiction. So the minute you
Yes.
remove it, because logically, Rachel, most people build up all the terrible reasons why they shouldn't do something. So that's logical. So they go, why shouldn't I drink? So they come up with, well, my family, it's ruining my life. It's, it's destroying my work. It's whatever. They come up with a chunk of list, a whole list of why they shouldn't be doing it, instead of looking at why they do it. And by the way, and this is controversial, but why they do it is not because of what happened when they were 4 years of age. And that's a bit harsh, but that isn't why they did it. And that's what I think is different, because you can analyze paralysis, as they say. You can overanalyze anything as to why you think you're doing it. But until you understand the real reasons why you're doing it, you'll never know. The reason why somebody takes heroin is because they take heroin. It's a chain reaction. The reason why
Yeah.
somebody picks up a cigarette is because they pick up a cigarette. It's a chain reaction. The reason why somebody takes alcohol is because they take alcohol. I don't care who's listening now. If somebody had a bad day at school when they were 10, they didn't go, Mom, I'm really stressed. I need a scotch. Didn't happen. You were all, you see what I mean? You were already an addict to some
Yes.
degree. What I mean by that is you already held the belief. This is key to understand here. You already held the belief that there was some kind of pleasure or crutch in the substance. So therefore, that you may not have it may not have felt that you was addicted, but the minute something bad happens in your life, or good, because it tends to be the complete opposite. So if it's a good time in your life, you drink like crazy. Bad time, you drink like crazy. You wouldn't have done that before you started drinking, because people say, well, it's just self-sabotage. I want to, it was the easiest way to destroy my life. And you think, well, was it? Because if you really wanted to do that, well, take up heroin. But you don't take up heroin if you was already taking heroin. It just doesn't. There's so many anomalies, and hopefully some of the questions that come up in this next hour, we can just pinpoint them. Because a lot of people who are listening, their hairs on the back of their neck will go up, as a lot of people do when they first start reading the book, and by the end of it, they go, I can't get you now.
Yeah.
But they don't
Yeah.
get me at first, and that's the problem. They get really annoyed at first.
Okay, so Jason, just to say to people on the call, because I know people have been joining while you've been speaking, if you do want to put a question to Jason, then just put a line in the question box and we'll come to you. If you want to remain anonymous, then just give me a pseudonym name, which I should refer to you by, and we'll do it that way. Um, yeah, I mean, just to say, Jason, when I read the book, one of the really good things that you said right at the outset was do not attempt to stop drinking until you have completely finished reading. And I think that was really important because it took me about three or 4 days to read it. And it was really interesting while I was still drinking over that period how my relationship with drinking completely changed. And my last drink, although I hadn't at that time, I didn't intend it to be. I was actually sitting in Carluccio's restaurant at St Pancras Station. I'd just done a whole day event at St Paul's, and I hadn't actually eaten all day. And my blood sugar was really low, and I was exhausted, and it had been very draining. And I sort of ordered my normal glass of Pinot Grigio and this sort of spaghetti and meatballs thing. And I just realized that actually what my body was craving was not the glass of Pinot Grigio at all. It was just a meal. And I was sitting there eating it. And I looked up and I was in this restaurant and literally there were like shelves and shelves. You know how in Carluccio's they have bottles and bottles of
Mm,
wine all lining the
yeah,
shelves. And I just looked up and it was almost like I was in this pharmacy with bottles of poison just lined
yeah.
up.
No, exactly,
And I'm
yeah.
like, oh, this is really weird. And like, my body actually doesn't want that glass of wine. It just wants a plate of food. And my God, I'm surrounded by poison here. And it was really
The
funny
reason,
because on the train home, I then finished reading the book, and I just thought, oh my God, I had my last drink, and it was just like,
it's funny,
wow,
isn't it?
just like that.
Well,
Really,
the reason why I tell people to continue reading the book until they're ready to stop, of course, is because like virtually all addiction with alcohol, 95% is psychological, 5% is physical. The challenge most people have, they believe it's the other way around. They
yeah,
believe that the vast majority is a physical addiction, and actually the psychology plays a very small part. But actually, most addictions, in some addictions, you can point out clearly that it's all psychological. Then people find it very easy to understand, like gambling. So if I'm treating somebody for gambling addiction as an example, then it's very easy because you say, well, you're not withdrawing from chips, are you? So you're not withdrawing from something, but actually studies have shown that a gambler, a heroin addict, a smoker, and a drinker, that if you removed their particular crack substance addiction, if you will, away from them, that the vast majority of the physical symptoms that they suffer are very similar. So the shakes, the anxieties, and everything else, because it's actually caused by anxiety and fear based on you don't believe that you can enjoy your life or cope with your life without your frame crutch pleasure behavior. And it stems from the mind, clearly. And so
yeah,
the mind, as we know, when we're embarrassed, of course, that we can turn it completely bright red. There's been studies to show as well when somebody's very, very nervous, we're talking on a scale that they're being attacked by something or somebody. There's been a few cases where their stomach has literally twisted and they required an operation to untwist it again. It's knotted to such a degree and that was purely fear from their mind that's created such a physical effect. So it's quite obvious that actually anxiety and fear and the shakes and the palpitations can easily be equated to this fear of being without what they believe is their frame, crutch, or pleasure. When you And all we're doing throughout the book or whatever books I write or anything else, all you're trying to do with the individual is say, look, here's what you think is your friend. So it's a relationship essentially. And you want somebody to step outside the relationship that they're in. Very similar to when you see, and anybody listening might have experienced it themselves or known a friend or a family member that have. When I grew up around alcohol like crazy, and there were several family members I grew up around nothing but women, because all the men tended to be, I'm trying to think of a polite word for bastards, but I can't. And they tended to be quite physically violent as well. I mean, not only alcohol abusive, but also very abusive to people like my mom and so on and so forth. And a lot of people would look at somebody in a relationship like that and say, well, why don't you just get out? If you're not emotionally attached, logic says, well, hang on, they're mentally and physically abusing you. Why don't you just leave? You say you hate them. Why don't you just leave? And then obviously the answer comes back and says, but I love them too. Now, to anybody outside the relationship, of course, they will think that they're just idiots and stupid and all the other things that you might look at a smoker or a heavy drinker as being if you're not in the trap yourself. And so the only way that that person is ever going to escape is by understanding that this particular individual has undermined their confidence, their courage and their self-respect to such a degree for so long, they've got rid of all their peer group entirely around them. So their support network, one by one, any other male that was ever in their life has gone one by one because he has removed them subconsciously. All their friends have gone, again, slowly but surely, but they went. And now their whole life relies on this one individual. So the same thing that's knocking you down is also the same thing that comforts you and picks you up. So you are scared to stay in the relationship, as people in a violent relationship will tell you, but they're also very fearful to get out of the relationship too. Now, the fear, of course, of getting out is not there. The fear is false evidence that appears real, but it does appear real to them. And in the same way that somebody with alcohol, there's no genuine hold. It's only the hold over their mind. And the mind is saying that you cannot enjoy your life or cope with your life without what you believe to be your friend, crutch, or pleasure. Once you break it down and you remove all the illusions that alcohol has, or smoking, or whatever, then it can be for the person that is, actually would ideally love to jump ship. Actually, it just makes the process a lot easier for them because they realize they're not giving anything up. They're getting rid of something, so therefore they're not making a sacrifice. And if you're not making a sacrifice, there's no willpower needed.
Yeah. And one of the really neat sort of mind tricks that you give in your book towards the end, Jason, was this thing about once you've stopped drinking, the kind of the analogy of it's a bit like being in a new car that you haven't driven before, where the indicators and the windscreen wipers are on the wrong side to the car you used to driving. So you go to
Right.
turn the wind, you go to turn left, and then you accidentally switch the windscreen wiper on. And that analogy is like when you think, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have a drink at this moment? And that's been really interesting to me because in those moments I've realized that it's not the drink I want, it's a relief from something, a kind of an anesthetic for something.
Well, it is,
And
but
typically,
also,
yeah,
yeah,
I was
go on.
just going to say, typically, actually, it is because my 5 kids are going absolutely crazy after I've had a really hard day. And
Yeah.
I just really realized that before I would just pour myself a very large glass of wine as my anesthetic, so I could
But
sort of
of course,
zone out
and
of the
also,
situation. And
of
so
course,
many women have so many women actually responded to that blog post that I wrote. And I really think that it's a big female thing, is that a lot of women use it as a bit of an anesthetic to zone out of that kind of frenzy
well, they
of
do, yeah, but they do, but equally, and again, I'll pick up on this a little bit, Rachel, as well, because yeah, equally, that is one of the reasons that they will then think why they are drinking or having the drink. But equally, if you saw them lying on a beach with no kids around, putting their feet up, or as the sun's going down at 6 o'clock in the evening, they'll have another reason why they're having that drink, and
yeah.
both will be the antithesis of each other. So one will be because I needed to zone out because I was stressed. The other one will be because I was relaxed. Hang on a minute, which one is it?
Yes.
If you're already relaxed, which one is it? So the point is that all of us will try and come up with, and this is why it's so important. We'll try, because rationally and logically, we have to try and find out the reasons why are we doing that. I can't think of a more stressful period of our lives than going from primary school to secondary school. Personally, right? I think it's quite a huge jump for kids. And before you know where you are, especially I was 3 buses away in the school that I had to go to, and I arrived 6 months after everybody else because I lived in Africa for a short period of time. So I was really stressful moving in. But I wouldn't have imagined for a nanosecond that that stress would have been lessened if I happened to have a can of special brew with me. You know, we learn to adjust all this. Our brain, in other words, will, no matter how stressed we are, no matter how overwhelmed we are, our brain will never look for any alcohol as a form of solution until we have already started drinking. And then it's under the impression that it believes it helps us to relax and so on and so forth, because we tend to be in relaxing situations when we take it. Because look, you've got 5 kids driving you crazy, as an example, right? And they're going and they're pulling at your shirt tails and they're going and they're being noisy. But
Yes.
oh, you can have a glass of wine, sip the entire glass of wine. If they're still doing the same, you'll still be angry. Because if alcohol really calmed people down, then you wouldn't have 98% of attacks on hospital staff every weekend. They wouldn't be alcohol-fueled individuals. Because alcohol, if it helped you to relax, well, they'd all be chilled out in their settee. But they're too busy.
Yes.
But they're getting hold of bottles, they're smashing it into, and they're putting it in someone's face. This is not somebody on marijuana. This is somebody on alcohol, right? And this
Yeah.
happens all the
Yeah.
time. So, anyway, to go back, so the windscreen wiper, the idea behind that is you're quite right, in the sense that it takes about 21 days to a month or whatever the case is before you get used to your new car, essentially. Right? So when the kids are playing up and you're used to going for a drink, then of course you say, well, why did I used to do that? You haven't even got to ask that question. Don't even bother why you used to. The thing is, you have a windscreen wiper come on in that moment, and all you've got to do is indicate, and then that's it. And once you've indicated, you interrupt the pattern, and then you're okay. But
Yeah.
if you go into a spiral of wondering why you did it, or is it going to be the same again, or is it this, your brain doesn't need to know any of that. It just needs to go, yeah, you don't do that anymore. And then boom, you just move on. They
Yeah.
just go, well, I don't do that, so what do I need to do? Oh, I know what I need to do, is I need to lock the kids in a cupboard. Do you know what I mean?
Uh, and
Before we get complaints, that was a joke. That was a joke before we get complaints.
yeah, no, 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 and it's quite funny actually because my husband is a drink. He loves his drink, and the first weekend I told him all about this thing and it's poison, and this is my view now, and I'm not drinking anymore. And he like over Saturday lunch he opened this bottle of wine and he just said, "I'm just pouring myself a large glass of poison."
Listen, Rachel, listen, you were a bit like me when I first stopped, and I tell you what I have learned. I think we matured, didn't I, when it comes to knowing what to say and what to do. And it's funny because I was quite adamant in the book when I first wrote it. I was absolutely adamant that look, you're either a drinker or a non-drinker, right? There's no halfway measures here. That's it. And it was the only way that I could really get it across that people would stop and realize what it is, and it had the most impact. Since then, my definition of addiction is slightly different. Okay, so if I was to ask somebody, how do you know you're addicted to alcohol or anything? Because not everybody who eats chocolate is addicted to chocolate. Not every single person that smokes nicotine is addicted to nicotine. Not every single person that drinks alcohol is addicted. But, and this is a big but, the vast, 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 vast majority of people are. So,
Yeah.
so the question is this: if the thought, and please, if you're wondering if you're addicted or not, if you're listening in, so well, I'm not. I can control it, I can do this. Just ask yourself this question genuinely, seriously, not hyperbole out loud and go, yes, of course, but just answer it honestly in your own head. To me, it's this: if the thought of never doing it again, whatever it is, fills you with an abnormal fear, then you're hooked. If it doesn't, then you are not. So, if somebody says to you, right, you can never drink alcohol again, because it's going to cause you liver disease and you're going to die next week, right? Whatever the case is. If it fills them with a slight disappointment, they think, no, I quite like the glass of wine, but okay, yeah, cool. And they genuinely don't miss it and they're fine with it, well, then they weren't hooked. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
And these are the people that might have a glass of wine once a week, but have never been in the stage where they ever thought, oh, I can't go without life without it, or whatever the case. They can go sometimes 2 months without it, don't even think about it, or whatever. But this is what I want to get across, that these are the minority. See, society thinks these are the majority, and the minority are alcoholics. I
Yeah.
want to get across the very, 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 very few people, real minority, make up those people.
And
And in the same way that some people smoke a cigar at Christmas, and they smoke a cigar at birthday, and they smoke a cigar at somebody else's birthday, and they might have 6 cigars a year. These are the rarest smokers on planet Earth. We're talking 99.99% of smokers do not do that, nor can they do that. And it's not
yeah.
because they were born with nicotine blood. It's not because they were born a nicotineaholic or any such nonsense of that nature. it's because of the nature of the beast gets most people the other way.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting, Jason, with the blog post that I wrote, a lot of people in the comments and emails kind of said something along the lines of, "Oh my God, I never realized that you battled addiction." Well, actually, I don't have a problem with alcohol, although I do rather like my glasses of wine every night, sort of response. And it was really interesting, that response. Now, I'm going to actually come now to Carol because
Okay.
she wants to speak to you because she says you're making it sound easy. It's not easy. And so I
Okay.
think she might be a good person if I can get Carol live to speak to you. So, Carol, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Carol. Are you happy to come on the call with Jason? I'm assuming you sent me some questions, so you are.
Yes.
Do you want to talk to Jason about your question?
Hi, Carol. I'm
My,
here.
my questions are is it's a very fine line between addiction and really enjoying something um, and the whole thing. And I'm listening to you, and it sounds so easy, and it sounds so easy between somebody that is addicted, for inverted commas, to somebody that isn't. And I'm very confused about how you can help somebody to move from one thing to the other. That's where my confusion is. And
Sorry,
I'm
Carol. Can
listening,
you just
Rachel.
clarify to move from what to what? Sorry, can you just clarify that again? Sorry, I misheard.
To
It broke
move
up.
from what you think is okay to what isn't okay.
No, no,
And
but like,
I looked at Rachel's tweets and webinars, not webinar, but tweets earlier on, and I got the distinct impression, Rachel, that it was quite tough, that alcohol was a really strong part of your life. And I'm going, so how, in that real part of your life that it played, then reading a book altered it so dramatically. I'm so intrigued,
can
and
can
I wish it was as simple as that.
can I jump in just for a second,
Sure.
Carol, before Rachel answers that? Just to give an analogy, and it's, no analogy is going to be identical. So it's a random analogy, and I can give a couple of
Sure.
them. But do you remember the old silly Rubik's cubes that was out in the 80s?
Of course.
Okay, fine. Well, yeah, not some. Believe it or not, some people don't remember them. Anyway, you do, which is good. Did you ever try to do it, Carol?
Well, I tried it and I couldn't do it.
Okay, fine. Now, with every Rubik cube that was ever sold, along came a solution. Genuinely, there was a little booklet that came with
Yes.
it. I'm
Yeah.
imagining you were like me and like 99.99% of people that bought a Rubik's cube, that you either can't remember that the solution came with it, or you discarded it with the packaging, and you painfully tried to do it yourself, as most
No,
people did.
I just was not interested in Rubik Cube.
Right, but you tried to do it.
Well, kind of, not really.
Okay, well, okay. So not to get too confused, because last year if you tried to do it and you said you had.
Yeah.
Okay, but all those people. Okay, so even if you've never tried it, would you make a general assumption then? You would have seen many people that were trying to do it at the time, I'm guessing. And of those people that you were
Sure.
seeing,
Yeah.
did you ever see anybody complete the Rubik Cube?
Yes, I have, with
Right,
complete
okay.
joy.
Complete dream, of course. Over the moon, amazing. Now, would you say that they were quite gifted in some way if they could complete the
No,
Rubik's Cube?
no.
No, okay, but okay, you wouldn't. Why is that? Do you not think they need to be mathematically
Because
minded?
they had a tenacity and a real desire, and they were trying this and trying that and trying the other. They were really into to try and find out the route through.
The route through. Okay, did they? Okay, the person that you know that could do it, did they? Did it take them a long time to work out the solution?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
it
fine.
did.
Now, okay, here's the point. And it was probably only one individual, maybe two at the most, that you can remember actually being able to complete the Rubik's Cube.
Sure,
The vast
sure.
majority could complete one side with all the colours around one side, but that was pretty much about it. And they were usually very proud of that element of it. So what happens is, we're talking about references here, Carol. So somebody who wasn't even interested in the Rubik's Cube, you probably believe that actually, as a concept, it's difficult to do. Would you say that?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, well, you're saying, of course. No, no, okay. So you believe, like everybody else believes, that the cube itself is very difficult to do.
Well, it's
However,
difficult. Yeah. Yeah.
It's difficult what?
It's difficult to do, yes.
Okay. Now, the person that tried to do it by themselves, of course, equally. So everybody who tries to do it and fails compounds that belief that you have that it's difficult to do. You pick up the cube, you try and do it. You can't do it, so that again gives you another reference that it's virtually impossible to do this cube. You see some other guy who eventually, through tenacity and through hard work and through all, eventually does it. But they were pretty special. You need to put in a lot of time, energy, effort, this, and then you say eventually somebody may be able to do it, just they've got the amount of time they'd have to invest. However, what I'm trying to point out, it came with a solution. Now, if that person that you knew didn't have to go through all that pain or tenacity or anything else, all they had to do was study the solution. That's all they would have had to do. They wouldn't have had to work it out themselves. It was already worked out for them. But nobody followed the actual solution. But when you sit down and follow the solution, instead of it taking years or months, or even weeks, it takes days. And then you get the idea behind it, and then even the people that can complete the Rubik's Cube still have no idea how they do it. They know if they follow a certain pattern, if they do it logically, they'll never do it.
Yes.
If you do it illogically, with the pattern, it falls into place. What I'm saying is this, is that something like alcohol, for example, on the surface, and I do agree with you, Carol, look, I'm not saying that your perception isn't, that look, and I'm not saying that you haven't, it might not be you or somebody you know, or it doesn't matter who, finds it difficult to stop drinking, or you know millions of references where people have found it difficult to stop drinking. So your brain won't accept or can't accept or finds it difficult to accept, which I fully understand. How can just reading a book possibly change the mindset? And it's a bit like having the Rubik's Cube and having the solution. And until you have the solution that switches the mind into a particular way, it's almost impossible to do. But then something can make it very easy if once the nature of the trap is understood. Now,
Sure.
again, it's one of them things that's really hard to get across because it's a 300-page book. So, and it's a form of hypnosis, the book as well, in terms of it repeats the key points over and over and over and over again in order to, well, it's a form of de-hypnosis, essentially. I think people have been hypnotized to drink. So it's a form of de-hypnosis. And so that, but I understand why you think potentially it can be difficult. But that's why somebody in Rachel's situation, where just because it had a hold for God knows how many years, doesn't mean that it wasn't always easy to get out of. It just means, it's a bit like being in a maze and not having a map. If you don't have a map of the maze, you can be in there for years. If somebody gives you a map, it's easy to get out. Does that make sense?
I've just muted Carol back there, Jason, but I'm just to give my little two penneth on this, and as to give a little side view. It's a bit like being under a magic spell. A bit like when sometimes when you're in a relationship with someone who you really, really, really love, and they don't. It's not as returned, and you're obsessional about this person, and then one day, you break up or something, and one day kind of the magic spell is broken, and you look back and you think, why did I ever bother with that person? It's like kind of a bit like that. And I think your book, it like breaks the magic spell. That's how I found it. It's like when I started reading the book, I kind of thought, actually, I really like my glasses of wine, and and okay, I'll read the book, and maybe occasionally I go over the top. But generally, I'm in control, and I only drink wine. I don't drink spirit. I don't really drink much before 6 o'clock in the evening. And so I had all these reasons stacked up why I was actually okay. And actually, as I read your books, we've just had a question come in saying you haven't told us how to stop or why we should. So I think that's the next point we need to get onto. But I had all these very convenient excuses, and you kind of exploded them out of the water relentlessly, chapter by chapter, until by the end of the book, there was almost no way that I could continue to drink, because there was just no point anymore. Why? Oh my God, why have I been doing this for 40 years? It was like that kind of waking up from a magic spell. So,
Well, listen,
could you encapsulate that how to stop and why we should answer for one of the callers who's just sent that question in?
Well, listen, I'll do my little best. The person that's asked the question, how do I stop and why should I?
Yes.
I'm not here to tell you why you should stop. Listen, it's an individual thing. You may be one of the very few individuals that literally has a glass of wine at the weekend. You don't exercise the degree of control over it, and to you, it's fine. I doubt that, because I doubt very seriously that is the case. Otherwise, why would you be here at 7:30 on a random Tuesday evening listening to a seminar on alcohol? So I'm assuming you're the person that that kind of wants to stop but doesn't want to stop, because that's what addiction is. You know, all addiction is one part of you does want to stop, the other part doesn't want to stop. So it's a bit like the relationship thing. In terms of how to stop, first of all, before we go, you know, why to is different for everybody. For me, it was control. So for me, I just didn't want to exercise control over something anymore that ultimately was controlling me. Because many people say, look, I can control my alcohol. Well, the mere fact that you are having to control, if you are, means that you're not in control. If somebody offered me a carrot at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I said, no, I always wait till after 7 o'clock, but I'd like one now, but I managed to control my carrot intake till after 7, that would prove that I do have a carrot problem. That wouldn't prove that I didn't have one. That would prove that I did. So the point is this: I was always exercising a degree of control over alcohol. So, you know, I would not have some, and somebody would invite me out on a Wednesday night, and I wouldn't go. Because if I did go, I would drink, and if I drank, it means that I would miss a degree of the next day, or I was working the next day. So it was controlling many areas of my life. I had a perfectly good car on the forecourt, for example, that I couldn't drive at weekends, because every weekend I would go out and get drunk, so I'd have to have taxes. So those taxes alone will cost, well, I did math, and it was going to cost me £18,000 in my lifetime, and I'm paying for a decent car. Alcohol alone was going to cost me, as a normal, quote-unquote normal, whatever you call it, somebody who drinks normally, and that's quite a lot, by the way, for most people, because they always, you know, they drink at social gatherings when they're watching the football in the evening meal, this, that, and the other. It adds up to quite a lot. I was going to spend £100,000 in money in my lifetime on alcohol. I mean, that's a huge sacrifice in terms of money as well, and all for what? All for, and I was trying to analyze it. I go, well, what was the point of getting drunk? You know, I'd go somewhere and have a few drinks, and then I'd end up just sitting at a bar and talking and basically repeating myself over and over again to the same people that I've known for God knows how long. And the worst part about alcohol, of course, is that it destroys your courage. You know, a courageous act can only take place when you overcome fear. If alcohol removes your fear, you don't ever use your courage muscle. So therefore, I didn't have the level of confidence that I could have had. I was always hiding behind alcohol. And it's really hard in the short space of time. If I did an alcohol session, that takes 3 to 5 hours. So, you know, we've got 20 minutes, you know, left on here. So, you know, in terms of how to stop drinking, well, without how to is I'm going to get on to. First of all, you need to understand the nature of the trap. Understanding the nature of the trap fully, well, then you have to read the book. I'm not selling you the book; it's in the library. Okay, right? Go to the library, pick up a copy, take it out, and then read the book, right? Because that essentially explains it all, or explains how to. But the how to at the end is very simple. See, the how to stop is doing the opposite of what most people tell you to do. So, for example, a lot of people will say to you, take each day as it comes, as an example. Well, first of all, in the book, I said you can't take your life any other way. You have to take each day as it comes. I mean, it's a silly statement. Another one would say avoid drinking situations. This is what they say when you first stop. I say confront drinking situations. Because look, if you've got a car and you all of a sudden buy a new car and you want to adjust to the new car, whatever the case is, or you just pass your driving test, a better analogy. So you just pass your driving test. Well, you can't adjust to driving unless you get out there and drive. How can you adjust to a life of not drinking if you're avoiding all drinking situations? And all it does is perpetuate the belief that you made some kind of sacrifice. Also, I didn't replace. As I always say to people, don't replace with non-alcoholic beers and wines, unless you happen to like them. But most people don't like them. They're having them because they're subconsciously trying to make up what they feel they're missing out on. Equally, when I went out for a meal out, for example, so I didn't feel deprived, because there was once I was at an Italian restaurant, and I was with my partner at the time, and she ordered a glass of wine that we always used to have together, and they served me a glass of water, but it was warm, it was in a different kind of glass. So I said, look, can I have the same wine glass, but can you frost it? Can you bring the water cold? Poured the cold water in, and I could still say cheers, and it looked like a wine glass and all of that. Happy day. I wasn't missing out on alcohol, I was missing out on the ritual. So you just do things that will make it easy. Listen, I just made sure that when I went out, I observed drinkers when I went out. I didn't try and hide away. But look, none of that's going to make sense. Like I could say how to stop drinking is this. You just don't pick up another drink, right? More importantly, you don't envy people that do drink. You don't look at them and say, I wish I could have that. You go out as normal. You're happy as normal. And you just confront every situation as normal. You don't hide out. But none of that will make any decent sense at all. Because if you're listening there with an alcohol problem, you go, that's absolutely ridiculous advice. And it is stupid advice unless you understand the nature of the trap first. The trap itself is to make you believe you can't enjoy life or cope with life without that liquid substance, which is what the book explains. But in 20 minutes, it's going to be hard to recover it. Yeah.
I think one of the key things for me, Jason, when I read it was just this realization that there was nothing wrong with me. I wasn't an alcoholic.
No.
I was simply drinking a substance that was highly addictive. So of course I was going to want, after that first, usually a glass and a half, the addiction, because it's you're drinking an addictive substance that reduces your ability to withstand it. Of course you're going to want another one. And
But it just creates a hole. It's a bit like Pringles will tell you once you pop, you can't stop, right? And people still
yes,
do it. Alcohol's the same way. Look, anybody listening, just think the days before you had your first alcoholic drink, no matter how stressful your childhood was or anything else, but before you did. And I guarantee you, the first alcoholic drink you had, 9 times out of 10, there are exceptions here. Like my nan gave me some alcohol when I was about 10 or 11. And I can analyze that and say, well, that was during a stressful time. Or listen, but mainly, we first go to alcohol because our friends are doing it, or because the film star's doing it, or because we just want to have it, or whatever the case is. And you're quite right. We were fine and whole and complete before we had it, Rachel. As soon as we have it, we create a hole. All drugs create a hole, which we then try and fill with the very thing that created the hole. Now, the
yes,
thing is, the hole gets bigger, so then we try and fill, and it does appear to fill it, in the same way that taking off tight shoes appears to give you pleasure. But you wouldn't put on tight shoes just to get the pleasure of taking them off. I
yes,
mean,
exactly.
if I went snowboarding and I took off my snowboarding boots, I get a genuine pleasure and relaxation from that. But all I'm doing is ending the aggravation that was caused by having them on in the first place. And in the same way, non-drinkers are fine when you go. If you look at non-drinkers, they're not, and they go, oh, that's their personality. You were a non-drinker before you started drinking. We all were. We didn't start drinking when we were 3 or 4. And some people will argue, they go, yeah, but I remember, my mum gave me some scotch on the end of my dummy when I was 2. Rubbish! She might have done, but that's not why you started drinking when you were 14. It's got nothing to do with it, right? So, but we're trying to analyze anything. But you're right, it creates a hole. We then try and fill the hole with the very thing that it created. Till in the end, of course, if something bad happens in our life, but we believe, of course, if something bad happens, I don't know, elsewhere in our life, we already have an additional hole caused by the fact we're already addicted to alcohol. The hole seems massive to begin, so we try and fill it with more alcohol. We don't try and
Yeah,
fill it with heroin because we haven't actually broken the heroin kind of divined it. We haven't broke that seal, but we have broke the alcohol seal, and we believe it. And like you said, all you've done, Rachel, is literally close the hole again. That's all you've done, because
yeah.
most people drinking who feel like a non-drinker already feels in the same situation.
Look, Jason, let me just talk to you a bit about social pressure, because there's been a few questions on this coming in. For example, one person saying, I drink at least one glass a night and more at weekend. I like it, but I think it's bad for me. Very hard to stop for social reasons. And I had another question in advance of the session from Denise, who said
Yeah.
she's happy for me to read this out. She says, I find it easy not to drink if I stay in with my non-drinking partner, but out at a social event, I have the breaking strain of a Kit Kat. I find one problem is to find an alternative drink that I enjoy. 2 lime and sodas are about all I can take of fizzy drinks. I love water, but it seems a bit boring. See, I have plenty of excuses. Also, I won't book dinner out with friends if I have a running race booked the next day because I can't say no. Last Sunday was a complete write-off because of drinking too much Saturday night. I'm fed up with wasting time and feeling I let myself down because I can't stick to my plan of not drinking. So this is someone who's clearly kind of caught in that trap of kind of, it is an addiction. And I think that's the real,
Well, they're
real
caught.
point. You're drinking an addictive liquid. Of course you're going to want
Well,
to
they're
drink
caught in
more.
a, well, they are, but also you cannot freedom of choice without the freedom to refuse. So if somebody thinks they're addicted or not addicted, it's not necessarily she clearly doesn't have the freedom to refuse. So therefore, she is addicted. So you are, is she addicted or not? She is addicted because she doesn't have the freedom to refuse. She's pointed that out in her
Yes.
question. So therefore, I would advocate clearly that she goes to the library, picks up the book, reads it, and then it will answer all the questions because she still believes that there is a genuine pleasure or crutch. Now, of course, she's searching for answers. So what she will say, of course, and she's already alluded to that, I have enough. Even after she said the reasons why she was drinking, she said, I've got all the excuses because she's looking at things like, I love the taste of it. She said, I just like, I've tried other drinks, but but actually, I like water, but there's only so much water you can have. Well, that's because water doesn't dehydrate you, of course. I mean, that's, obviously alcohol does dehydrate you, so you can only have a certain amount of those drinks. Now, there's such a wide range in pubs and clubs of different types of drink. To me personally, I go in, I have sparkling water, I'll have lemon and lime in the sparkling water. That's it. Am I drinking as much as everybody else? No, because there's only so much sparkling water you can have. I quite like the taste of it, but I can have a pineapple juice. I can have. There's so many other things you can have. But the reason why she's drinking that is not solely because she likes the taste of the wine or this, that, and the other, because she gets to a point where she can't even run the next day. So it's not a case of I love the taste of it. It's not she just wants to take, because she could easily just have half a glass of wine then, couldn't she? But she can't.
Yeah.
She just like the taste of it, but she can't have half a glass of wine because she's addicted. And the only way to get free of that relationship is to see it for what it is. And
Yeah.
see it's mentally and physically abusing you on a consistent daily basis, undermining your courage, your confidence, and your self-respect. It's keeping you an addict. It's keeping you a slave. It's controlling you. You're not controlling it. If you want ultimate freedom, you see it for what it is. You wouldn't have a friend in your life that did that. There's nobody that would have a friend to say, I've got my best friend. My best friend, doesn't let me go out at night. My best friend, stops me running certain days. My best friend gives me a hangover. My best friend feels like a punch me in the face. My best friend costs me £100,000. My best friend stops me driving my car. My best friend, it's not your best friend, is it?
Yes.
It's your worst enemy. You know what I mean? So don't be deluded to think that this is your best friend. It is.
Yeah.
See it for what it is and get it out of your life. Say, look, I don't want you in my life anymore. Look, you can be in their life. In the same way that if you become a vegetarian, you see it's the same argument. I've stopped eating meat and fish and dairy, so I don't go out for dinner with my friends. I mean, you still go out for dinner with your friends, you just have a different meal. You
Yeah,
wouldn't judge
exactly.
them. You wouldn't judge them because they're having meat, or nor should you. Everybody should live. You shouldn't judge people that drink. You shouldn't judge people that eat. You shouldn't judge people. People do things for different reasons for whatever they do, and I don't believe you should judge anybody. But I think if you made a personal choice, then equally those people shouldn't judge you either. There is a social pressure to drink, but that's in the same way that there is pressure on heroin addicts to take heroin in amongst their heroin taking friends.
Yeah.
There is pressure amongst dope smokers to take dope in your dope smoking friends. They're just in pressure by society because most of society drink alcohol. So therefore there is a pressure to drink, although it is changing. I think we're on the verge that it is changing
I think
slightly.
I think that's an interesting point to come on to, Jason, about the fact that 80% of people do drink and it's very much seen as normal. And that was one of my big things of like, well, of course it's normal. Everyone drinks, don't they? Sort of thing. And I had a question before, well, not a question, but a statement actually before the call from a guy called Derek Williams, who runs the WOW Awards, and he's happy for me to read this out. He went on a Tony Robbins session, and they were asked at the start to list 3 things they really enjoyed, and his list was curry, coffee, and beer. And on the 4th day, he basically made a commitment to give up beer and coffee. And he said that was it. And he had his last beer in 2001, a pint of Foster's. And then he said, basically, to cut a long story short, over the years, and he's resisted all the social pressure to drink and to be at a party and to so much pressure to drink, but he's resisted it. And he's basically said, as the years have gone by, I have gradually come to despise the whole alcohol industry. It's about getting young people involved, keeping them involved. It's about making money. It causes so many problems. Several of his wife's family are alcoholic. One person's died. The worst thing about the whole industry is almost socially unacceptable not to drink. People are encouraged to believe that by having a drink they will have more confidence and have a better time. All total bullshit. So he's very, very you kind of
Well, it brings up a
zealous
very good
about
point.
this thing. And I think it's a good point to end on about this social pressure that it somehow, and I was very much brought up with it's a real treat to have a little, it's a real treat to have a drink. And I was kind of given sherry and lemonade. I remember when I was young, here's a little treat for you. And I grew up thinking that this was a magical treat that
Yeah.
was gave me much pleasure and joy, and that breaking that magic spell was like a real, oh my god, I've been conned for 40
Well, as he
years.
said, or as he alluded to, and as I pointed out in the very first chapter of my book, it is the only drug that I know of that you have to justify not taking. And I don't understand how we've reached the stage in our society where fair enough, look, if people want, I don't think alcohol should be banned. I don't think any of that, I don't have any strong opinions of that fact. I just think, look, if people are caught in the trap, or whatever the case is, if people choose to escape from the prison, which is what it is for many people, not everyone, but the vast majority of people, that they shouldn't have their personality attacked because they are not consuming a drug. It seems weird, society, that all of a sudden, that if you stop consuming a drug, that you are the one that gets hounded. Now, you wouldn't be that rude with anybody else. If somebody stopped taking heroin, you wouldn't say, well, why did you stop taking heroin? I mean, what a ridiculous question would that ever be? Now, some people say you can't equate heroin and alcohol in the same breath, and I'm ridiculous to do so. Indeed, I agree with that. Alcohol, if you take real deaths, I'm not talking about the stats of being 9,000 deaths per year. I'm talking about the real knock-on effect, the violence and everything else. Over 40,000 people in the UK died of alcohol last year, and of heroin, there was something in the region of 33. So you're quite right. We can't actually say that heroin and alcohol are the same at all. And there are lots of people taking heroin. I don't agree with heroin, but equally, there are a lot of similarities between the two as well. And by the way, if anybody's got images in their head that all heroin addicts are jacking up and lying on the floor like the advert back in the 80s, they're really not. There are a lot of high-powered people in high-powered businesses running them and in high-powered jobs who take heroin at weekends. Now, if somebody said to you, oh, am I a heroin addict? Well, I'll only take it at weekends when I'm watching the football or when I'm out socializing with friends. You would still call them a heroin addict. If somebody takes alcohol on a consistent, regular basis, they're not called alcohol addicts. You're either a normal drinker or you're an alcoholic. And one of my missions is just to try and separate this dividing line, to stop people believing that they have a disease for which there's no known cure, as if they were born with some kind of alcohol blood for which they have no power over. I just want to move away from this concept. I'm not saying get rid of it. I'm not saying that there isn't a place for AA. There is. There is a place for every methodology, and AA have saved the lives of millions of people throughout the world, and they continue to do so. Even as we have this conversation today, there are meetings taking place all over the world that are actually saving lives. All I'm saying is there is another concept for a load of other people that actually don't buy into the AA mantra for whatever reason, and actually they need another outlet, they need another way to stop, and actually this is it. It's giving them some clarity about the addiction, and it's also giving them some clarity about themselves, as you point out, Rachel, that it isn't you. In the same way that if I fell into quicksand, I don't think there's a flaw in my personality. I never would think there's a flaw in my personality. It's the nature of quicksand is to drag me under. If I then get out, I'm not an ex-quicksand sinker. I wouldn't call myself an ex-quicksand sinker. I wouldn't say that I was born with quicksand blood. I wouldn't have any other reference to quicksand other than I got out of there. And that would be the end of it. But we overanalyze this thing to death. Instead of thinking, oh, I used to drink, I don't drink anymore. Oh, why is that? Oh, I don't matter, it wasn't for me, is what I say. I say it wasn't for me, I thought it wasn't for me. Or I say I never drink when I'm sober. And that throws people's heads a little bit. And they go, what do you mean you never drink when you're sober? What does that mean? Well, clearly, if you analyze it, I just try and joke about it. Because it's like, yes, it's a serious subject in terms of when people are in it, I agree. But it's no longer a serious subject if you're already out. If you're already out, there's no need to be serious about it.
Jason, I'm going to get one last caller on the line before we end because we're running up to 8 o'clock. And this is a big fan of yours, and I hope she can speak. It's Shrimati. Shrimati, hi. Can you hear? Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're quite faint. Can you speak louder or?
Yeah, okay. I didn't have the mic on because I
Oh.
wasn't expecting to say hi.
Oh, I
but
hope
I'd love
it's okay to
say hi.
come to you because you sent a few lines in earlier, and I know you're a big fan of Jason.
Yeah, for sure. Yes. Yeah, I just wanted to say, Jason, that I love your work. You're a great inspiration. And Pat's just trying to give me some headphones here. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm really interested to look particularly into how juicing works with alcohol. I've mentioned that in this call so far. What is the place of juicing in particular?
That's a really good question. First of all, thank you very much for your kind comments. I really appreciate them. It's funny because juicing obviously came after I wrote the alcohol book anyway, but actually it plays a big part because although yes, the vast majority is psychological for what I call the average alcohol addict, but for somebody who's quite deeper into it, obviously sometimes there can be some physical symptoms coming off. Usually severe low blood sugar can be one of them, and sometimes a well thought out vegetable juice, if you will, for the first 7 to 10 days can really have a tremendous effect on just balancing those sugar levels beautifully. And so it can play a part. I mean, I'd love, because what's nice about vegetable juice in particular is that what they are really are mixed with some fruit, but they're really nice and they've got a rich creamy head on, and you have them in a pint glass, and it's really nice. Unfortunately, you go into the average pub or club, of course they don't serve, and nor can they. They wouldn't have the ability to serve fresh juices, and they're costing a fortune. But they can play a part, and maybe they have subconsciously for me. I don't know. I just happen to move into juicing at the same time. But to me, they are separate still, in the sense that, you know, if somebody can still get off of alcohol easily using the book, using the right mindset, even if they went on to eat, you know, pizza, chips, and drink Coca-Cola. I mean, you know, the point is although those other things are horrendously bad, you know, at least they would remove themselves from the hypnosis of alcohol.
Great, yeah. I mean, I would have thought also, as well as the physical effect of drinking beautiful juice, it's a bit of replacement activity as well.
Well, it is, but again, I don't think you should replace. I don't think you should look. I don't think your brain, if you're an alcohol addict, in the same way, if I got out of quicksand, I wouldn't need a replacement for quicksand. I shouldn't have been in freaking quicksand. I mean, if I get thirsty separately, I like a drink. If I get hungry, I like certain food. I get back to how I was before I started drinking alcohol. Does that make sense? I don't do replacement for something.
Yeah, I see.
That shouldn't have been there. Does that make sense? I know it's a different way of thinking, but that's why people fail when they come off, because they look for substitutes, they count the days, they start envying people that are still doing it, and they wonder why they struggle.
Very good. Yeah.
Fab. Okay, Shrimati, thanks for coming on the call. I'm going to mute you
Thanks,
back there.
Martin.
And yeah, just another interesting analogy from the book on that point is a bit like you were saying about Nelson Mandela. Once he'd left prison, it doesn't mean he never thinks about his time in prison. It doesn't, you know, you don't, it's not like you never think about alcohol, but you never want to go back into the prison, you know, so it's perfectly natural to think about.
I said, no, I agree. And also, it's the when people count the days and how long they've been free and stuff. I mean, you know, Nelson Mandela was free, you know, after 27 years, and he'd been free for like, you know, 3 hours or something, and he was coming up the street and yelling up and down. Nobody said to him, "I wouldn't celebrate yet, Nelson. It's only been an hour, or it's only been 3 hours." When you're free, you're free.
Exactly.
This craziness because most people aren't free. All they do is they're waiting to see when they fail. The problem is, if you hang around with your life after you escape from something, waiting to see if you fail, you're still in it. You're not out of it.
Yeah.
You haven't got your freedom. You're not running around. You're still not sure. And how long are you going to have that not sure feeling for? Some people say, well, you need to wait for a year before you know you're free. Well, who come up with that arbitrary figure? Somebody else says Nelson Mandela was free that day. John McCarthy, 7 years in Lebanon. He was free after 7 years. And in his book, he says he still thought about the Lebanon a lot. Because some people try not to think about drinking. No, you should think. If you try not to think about something, you will think about it. But it's what you think that makes the difference. So if you think, oh my God, I remember that well, as in I remember the hangovers, I remember how it got me, I remember it. It doesn't matter how many times a day you think about it, providing you think, oh my God, I'm free from that. But if you think, oh, I'm missing it, well then if you think about it once a day, it's too many. You know, it's all about your view of the nature of the trap. And if you see it for what it is, you can think about it every single day, every minute of every day for the rest of your life. And it shouldn't trouble you at all.
Yeah. Fantastic, Jason. Well, it's been really fascinating, and we've recorded this, so I'm going to be posting this up because I know there's a lot of people who wanted to listen who couldn't make it tonight. But I just want to say, from my viewpoint, Jason, once again, I really want to thank you. I mean, for me, it's like getting on for 2 weeks since I had that last drink in Carluccio's, and I have to say, I just feel so much healthier. My energy, my vibrational energy is so high and fast running now. It's really, really, really
Do you know what I
noticeable.
would say, Rachel? Can I give you one tip? One tip in
Yes.
order to stay free. What I would say is this: is that the reasons that you have for stopping drinking never change, but the relevance to you will change the longer you go without a drink. It's a bit like when you see a bad car accident. When you first see it, it slows you down. After a
Yes.
while, though, you're back up to top speed again. Now, 6 months down from here, 4 months down from here, you know, you won't be worried about the hangovers, how it's controlling you, this, that. You won't be worried about any of that because it's not affecting you.
Yeah.
At the same time, the conditioning and the brainwashing and everything else can creep back up. Here's some important thing to do. We need to dehypnosis ourselves, if you will, dehypnotize ourselves on a consistent basis. We need to retune ourselves. I call it retuning. You know, piano needs retuning all the time. Everything needs retuning. You can't just leave anything. You can't leave your
Yes.
brain either. So I would say reread certain specific chapters of the book near the end, you know, when you're bored, doing nothing, just so that it's constantly there. Because I tell you now, even though you won't realize it, the same thing that made you pick up a drink at the very beginning is still out there and will still have you pick up a drink again, but in a much shorter space of time. So it is vital in terms of reconditioning. Not that you don't feel free, because you do. Not that you see it for what it is. I'm just saying that can change slightly as the period goes on. So what I would advocate is just a couple of chapters. You know, after about 4 months, you might not need to read anything for about 4 or 5 months, doesn't matter. But every now and then, just dip in for a chapter on the train. Doesn't matter. Just whatever it is, just
Yeah.
make a conscious thing. Say, you know, I'm just going to read a couple of chapters. And that's the key to being free for life.
Yeah, well, I have to say, Jason, I've gone so public on this with my blog and everything and these webinars that if I were ever to be seen drinking ever again anywhere, I'd probably be lynch mobbed and like tweeted to the
Yeah, but
heavens. So
but Rachel, you've got a good excuse, you see. But Rachel, unlike me, you've got a great excuse, because you can say, "Oh, it turns out that Jason Vale book was crap." so you can always blame it not on you. You can just say, "I tried it." And you can just say, "Oh, that Jason Vale, that thing only lasted for 3 months, and then I had a drink." But you know, I thought he was brilliant, but it turns out he was absolute shite. So you've got a great out.
Well,
Whereas
I
I've got no
have to
out.
say, Jason, you have inspired me today. Looking at your website inspired me to order a juicer, which is on its way, and I'm this is my next phase now, is to do all your juicing
Well, listen, I'll get
recipes.
you on a
So
retreat as well, Rachel. I'll get you on one of my retreats as well. We'll have a little giggle up there.
yeah.
It'll be great.
So just to say to people, I'm going to end it there, but really do go to juicemaster.com and have a look at everything that Jason does, because it's so much more than just alcohol. That's just the kind of tip of the amazing iceberg of wonderful stuff that he's up to. So thank you very much for joining us, Jason. I've really enjoyed it.
Pleasure. And thanks to all those
And
that bothered to tune in. And I'm really sorry and frustrated, because the hour's never enough. I know we haven't got across even half of what I would love to have got across. It's really difficult. So apologies on that front, but thank you for joining us. Hopefully it's tweaked your mind a little bit. Hopefully you'll get the book from the library or something. And hopefully, even if it changes one of you, then it's been worth this hour.
yeah, fantastic. Thanks very much, Jason, and to everyone who's joined us on the call. So bye for now.
Bye.